My name is Melissa Carter, and for most of my life, I believed my older sister Vanessa was the one constant I could trust. Growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, our family wasn't perfect. Far from it, actually. Dad left when I was 7, and Mom worked double shifts at the diner just to keep food on the table. Vanessa, 3 years older and always calm under pressure, basically raised me. She taught me how to tie my shoes, how to lie when Mom asked if I'd finished my homework, and how to sneak leftover birthday cake from the fridge without making a sound. To me, Vanessa was a mixture of mother, mentor, and myth. She always seemed to know what to say and when to say it. She had this elegance, a kind of quiet confidence, like someone who had already figured out life, while the rest of us were just winging it. By the time I was in college, Vanessa had already landed a job with a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. She said it was mostly admin work and grant writing, but it paid well, and she traveled often for conferences, retreats, sometimes field visits to places I'd only seen in geography books. I used to tell people proudly, my sister works for global outreach programs. She helps people. It wasn't a lie, at least I didn't think it was. I stayed back in Charleston after college. I took a job as a high school English teacher, bought a little townhouse with more creeks than charm, and settled into a quiet rhythm. School during the week, wine and laundry on the weekends, and the occasional FaceTime call with Vanessa, where she'd always be somewhere with palm trees or ancient stone buildings behind her. Sometimes I'd ask what exactly she did, and she'd just laugh and say, "It's complicated. I'd bore you with the details." The truth is, I didn't care about the details. I cared about her. She was my anchor. But there were odd things. Just little slips that didn't make sense at the time. One night, about a year ago, she came to visit for Mom's birthday. We were all sitting in the living room, Vanessa, Mom, and me, and we started flipping through old photo albums. Vanessa excused herself to the kitchen to get some tea. When she came back, I asked if she remembered our trip to Myrtle Beach in 2004. She paused, blinked, and said, "You mean 2005, right?" I was sure it was 2004. I remembered the date because it was right after Mom and Dad's final custody hearing. We had gone to the beach as a distraction from the drama, but Vanessa insisted it was 2005. She even got weirdly defensive about it, laughing it off but not quite in a joking way. Just sharper than necessary. Later that night, I noticed she'd left her phone charging in the guest room. It buzzed once. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But I glanced at the notification. It was a calendar reminder that read, "Call Langley Re. Archives access. Use coded ref ID." Langley? As in CIA Langley? I assumed it was a coincidence. Some other Langley. Or maybe a colleague. But the phrase coded ref ID stuck with me. I mentioned it the next day, jokingly, while we were out getting coffee. I said, "What, you a spy now?" Vanessa smiled in that perfectly polished way of hers and replied, "Only in your wildest imagination, Mel." I laughed, but something in her tone was off. Like she wasn't laughing with me, she was laughing at me. The moment passed, and I let it go. I didn't want to be paranoid. Over the next few months, Vanessa's visits became more infrequent. Our calls grew shorter. Her stories more vague. She once told me she was going to Vienna for a climate summit, but when I looked it up, there was no such event listed in the city's calendar for that week. Again, I brushed it off. Maybe it was a smaller event. Maybe I was overthinking. But those small things piled up. One night, while grading essays late at school, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was silence, then a single click. I dismissed it as a robocall until I got 2 more over the next hour, each from different numbers. The next morning, I mentioned it to Vanessa in a text. She responded an hour later. "You didn't answer any questions, did you?" I was confused. I said, "What questions?" "It was just a hang-up." She replied, "Good. Stay alert. Love you." That was the moment something shifted. Stay alert? What the hell did that mean? The cracks in the image I had of my sister started widening. Suddenly, all those small slips didn't seem so innocent. The changed memories. The weird calendar entry. The false stories. The cryptic warning. I started to ask myself questions I never thought I'd ask. Who was Vanessa? And more importantly, what was she hiding from me? After that strange text exchange, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living beside a shadow. Vanessa, my sister, my role model, suddenly felt like a stranger. I tried to ignore it. I buried myself in lesson plans, stayed late at school helping students with their college essays, and distracted myself with streaming shows I didn't even care about. But the unease followed me like a second skin. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Sharon, our mom's younger sister. She lives in Savannah and hadn't seen Vanessa in years. She said she was going through some of Grandpa's old files and had come across a few documents Vanessa might want, stuff from when she applied for an international program in college. She asked for Vanessa's mailing address. Just text it to her, I said. I don't have her number, Aunt Sharon replied. She changed it, and her email bounces back. Is she okay? That was news to me. Vanessa always told me she was using the same number. Even last month, we exchanged texts on it. I asked Aunt Sharon to send me photos of the documents so I could forward them. An hour later, she sent a snapshot of a college application from 2007, supposedly filled out by Vanessa. Only the name at the top wasn't Vanessa Carter. It was Victoria Lane Douglas. I stared at the image, waiting for my brain to make sense of it. Maybe it was a typo. Or maybe it was an identity she used temporarily, maybe for a scholarship or program that required different documentation. My mind scrambled for reasonable explanations. But I couldn't stop staring at that name. Victoria Lane Douglas. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mom. Instead, I started digging. The next day, during my lunch break, I drove to the public records office downtown. I requested a search for both Vanessa Marie Carter and Victoria Lane Douglas. I told the clerk I was doing a genealogy project for my classroom, trying to appear casual. There were no public records for Vanessa Marie Carter before 2009, not even a high school diploma or DMV registration in the state of South Carolina. But Victoria Lane Douglas? She had a full profile. Born in Wilmington, North Carolina. Graduated from East Mecklenburg High School. Attended University of Georgia for 2 years, then vanished from the academic system entirely in 2008. That was the same year Vanessa supposedly moved to Washington, D.C., and started her work in nonprofit administration. My hands were shaking when I left the records office. I didn't want to believe it, but I also couldn't ignore the growing dread in my gut. That night, I dug through a box of old family photographs. Most were from my childhood, but I was specifically looking for Vanessa's graduation pictures. I found mine easily, cap, gown, smiling beside Mom. But Vanessa's? They were missing. Every photo that was supposed to be from her senior year looked off. In some, she was wearing different school colors. Others were clearly cropped or scanned from somewhere else. One photo in particular showed her in front of a school building that didn't match anything in Charleston. I ran it through a reverse image search, and it pulled up a public Flickr album titled East Meck Class of 2005. East Meck, Wilmington. My sister didn't go to high school in Charleston. She wasn't even Vanessa Carter until after I was already in middle school. I started to feel like the walls were closing in. Everything I thought I knew about my sister, our shared childhood, our inside jokes, the stories she told me, was suddenly painted in doubt. But it didn't stop there. I remembered that she had left a flash drive at Mom's house last Thanksgiving. She had been working on a grant proposal and borrowed Mom's laptop when hers froze. She left in a hurry the next morning and forgot the drive. Mom had stashed it in the drawer by the phone. I drove over the next afternoon, told Mom I was picking up some lesson materials she'd printed for me, and found the flash drive exactly where I remembered. Back home, I hesitated before plugging it into my laptop. What was I even looking for? Evidence? A confession? The flash drive had 2 folders. One labeled Work and the other Photos. The Work folder had spreadsheets, donor letters, and event planning templates. All looked legitimate. Boring even. But the Photos folder was locked with a password. That was the moment I felt the adrenaline kick in. I tried her birthday. Our dog's name. My birthday. Nothing worked. I even tried Victoria, just in case. No luck. The next day, I took the flash drive to a tech-savvy friend of mine from college, Toby Harris, who now runs a computer repair shop in Greenville. I told him it was a backup from my classroom laptop, and I'd forgotten the password. He said it'd take a day or two. When I got the call from him that weekend, his voice was unusually quiet. "Melissa," he said, "I don't know what's on this drive, but you should be careful." "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "There are photos of documents in here. Passports. IDs. In different names. I also saw what looked like surveillance photos. Taken in public places. Airports. Lobbies." I didn't respond. I couldn't. "There's also a scan badge. It says Contractor Access, U.S. Embassy, Manila. And Melissa, it has Vanessa's face on it. But the name says Nora Whitmore." That was the moment my stomach dropped. Vanessa had multiple identities. Not just one alias, several. And they were tied to international locations, government buildings, and official-looking credentials. She wasn't who she said she was. And now I had proof. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, images from the flash drive haunted me. Passports with names I didn't recognize, Vanessa's face under identities that didn't belong to her, surveillance photos of strangers. The woman I thought I knew was unraveling before my eyes, and I had no idea where the truth ended or began. My phone buzzed early the next morning. It was Vanessa. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Hey, Mel. Just checking in. I had a weird dream about you last night. Hope you're okay. Call me." Her voice was calm, warm, familiar. But now, it felt like a performance. Like every word had a script behind it. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and deleted the voicemail without responding. I needed answers, but I also needed to be careful. I called Toby back and asked him to keep the contents of the flash drive between us. He agreed but warned, "Melissa, I don't think she's just hiding from family. This kind of stuff? It's above our pay grade. You could get hurt." I believed him. But I wasn't ready to walk away. I took the day off from school and went to Mom's house again. I sat her down and asked her the one question I'd avoided all my life. "Do you know anything about Vanessa that you've never told me?" She blinked at me like I'd grown two heads. "What kind of question is that? Just answer me, Mom. Please." She grew quiet. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Then, after a long pause, she said, "She came back different." I sat forward. "What do you mean?" "After your dad left. She disappeared for 3 days, said she was staying with a friend, but something was off. She didn't talk about it. Didn't want to be touched. She burned her old journals. I thought she was just dealing with the divorce." "Was that when she started calling herself Vanessa?" Mom nodded slowly. "She asked me to help her change her name legally. Said she wanted a fresh start. I thought it was just trauma, you know? I never asked more questions. Maybe I should have. I didn't blame her. Vanessa, or Victoria, or Nora, or whoever she really was, had always been good at hiding. Back home, I locked my doors and started laying out everything I knew. A whiteboard in the kitchen became my conspiracy wall. Vanessa Carter, 2009, present. Victoria Lane Douglas, pre-2008. Nora Whitmore, Embassy ID. Photos, Manila, Vienna, Nairobi. Calendar, Langley contact, coded ref ID. I printed the documents from the flash drive and spread them across my dining table. My stomach twisted as I looked at embassy credentials and surveillance reports with foreign names scribbled in the margins. And then I saw it, something I hadn't noticed before. In one of the photos, Nora, was shaking hands with a man wearing a badge labeled State Department. In the background was a logo, Strategic Civilian Intelligence Liaison, SCL. I looked it up. SCL wasn't a public agency. But after an hour of digging through obscure news forums and redacted articles, I found mentions of it in whistleblower blogs. Black Ops. Civilian contractors. Deep cover roles in unstable regions. Recruits trained to blend in, people with no ties, no past, or the ability to shed one identity and slip into another. I stood there frozen. Was my sister a spy? Or worse, was she a ghost built by the government? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the woman who taught me how to drive and brought cupcakes to my high school plays could also be involved in covert intelligence work. But the facts didn't lie. I needed someone who could confirm what I was looking at. That's when I reached out to Kevin Morales, a journalist I'd met years ago at a writing workshop. He'd made a name for himself exposing military contracts and quiet scandals tied to defense spending. I sent him a vague message asking if he'd ever heard of SCL. Within an hour, he called me. How do you know that acronym? I found it connected to someone I know. I need to talk. He hesitated. Melissa, if you're messing around with this, you need to stop. These people bury things for a living. I told him I wasn't afraid. We met 2 days later at a diner in Colombia. I brought copies of everything, never the originals. As he looked through the documents, his face changed. He wasn't surprised, but he was concerned. You said this is your sister? She raised me, I said. I don't even know who she is anymore. Kevin leaned back in the booth, exhaled slowly, and said, These IDs are real. I've seen formats like this in a leak back in 2016. They're given to contractors who do off-record operations, usually in conflict zones or diplomatic gray areas. She's not just pretending to be someone else. She is someone else. Multiple someone else's. He tapped one of the manila photos. This one? That man she's talking to is part of an anti-corruption bureau. If she was there under alias, she was either gathering intel or she was the one being watched. I felt dizzy. So, what do I do? Honestly, you walk away. Burn the files. Delete the copies. Pretend you never saw any of it. I can't, I said. She's my sister. He looked me dead in the eyes. Then prepare yourself for the possibility that she's not. I left that diner more lost than I'd ever been. But I had made a decision. I had to confront Vanessa. Not angrily. Not emotionally. I needed to understand. I needed to hear it from her lips. Who was she? Why did she lie? And what danger was I in now that I knew? That night, I sent her a message. I need to see you. Face to face. No more lies. She responded 5 minutes later. I was wondering when you'd finally ask. We agreed to meet at a neutral place, Mill Creek Park in Rockville, Maryland. Not too far from D.C., not too close to home. I flew in under the guise of a teacher's conference and stayed at a nondescript motel just off the highway. Vanessa, or whatever her name really was, insisted we meet in public. It's safer that way, she said. It was late afternoon. The sun was low, casting amber light through the trees. I sat on a bench near the walking path, my hands clenched together, my breath shallow. I hadn't told anyone where I was. Not even Toby or Kevin. I didn't know if I was stepping into a heartfelt reunion or a trap. She appeared like a shadow, silent, controlled, perfectly composed. Dressed in black jeans and a fitted jacket, hair pulled back into a bun, sunglasses covering half her face. I stood. She smiled faintly. Hey, Mel. I didn't smile back. Vanessa? She sighed, then removed her sunglasses. That name's not mine. But I was her. For you. The words hit me like a gust of wind. I sat back down, unable to process what I was hearing. So, what's your real name? Victoria? Nora? Or, is there another I don't know about yet? She sat beside me. Names are tools, Melissa. They're not identities. They're just costumes. That's not an answer. She hesitated. I was born Victoria Lane Douglas, but that identity was burned a long time ago. Officially, she doesn't exist. Not anymore. I turned toward her, anger bubbling in my throat. So you've been lying to us? To Mom? To me? Our entire lives were fake. Her voice stayed calm. The emotions were real. What I felt for you, for Mom, that was always real. But yes, I was living under a cover. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. I'm your sister. You were my assignment, she said quietly, then corrected herself. At first, my stomach dropped. What are you talking about? She looked out over the pond, her voice softer now. After your dad left, our family was under watch. He wasn't just a deadbeat, Melissa. He was tied to a domestic surveillance case. The agency thought he'd passed something sensitive to your mom before he disappeared. They embedded me into your life as part of a long-term monitoring op. I was just a recruit back then, fresh out of training. I didn't know what I was doing. But you were just a kid. You latched onto me. You trusted me. I felt like I was floating, like my body had detached from the bench, and the world was turning upside down. You were sent to spy on our family? That's why you moved in with us. She nodded. That's why I became Vanessa Carter. I forged records, replaced someone else who never showed up for her foster assignment. The agency covered the rest. And Mom never knew? She thought I was placed through a state outreach program. She was desperate, working 2 jobs, just trying to hold the house together. She didn't ask too many questions. My fists clenched. You lived with us. You celebrated Christmas. You helped me get through puberty. You watched me cry when Dad left. Was all of that fake? She turned to me, eyes finally showing something raw. No. That part was real. That's why I stayed, long after the assignment ended. After they closed the case, I was supposed to disappear. But I couldn't leave you. You were the only real thing I'd ever known. I stared at her, heart pounding. Then why all the identities? The embassies? The surveillance photos? Because once you do one job well, they give you another, she said. I was promoted. I was good at blending in. So they kept sending me out, manipulating identities, forging paperwork, intercepting contacts. I've been to 24 countries under 13 different names. And you never thought to tell me the truth? I thought about it every day, she said. But if I did, they'd wipe me out. Maybe even you. I flinched. So now that I know what happens. Vanessa looked at me with an intensity I'd never seen before. You can forget all of this. Erase the files. Walk away. Go back to your normal life. Or what? Or you do what you've always done, you dig. And you find things that put you in danger. This isn't a movie, Mel. There's no happy ending if you keep pushing. I swallowed hard. Then tell me this. Was anything we had real? Or was I just her cover story? She looked genuinely hurt. Melissa, I didn't have a family before you. I didn't even know what it felt like to be someone's sister. You gave me that. You taught me how to be human. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced myself to stay strong. Then why now? Why let me find out? Because they're retiring me, she whispered. I have one last assignment, and after that, they're scrubbing all my records. Wiping every trace of me. I needed you to know the truth before I disappeared. Where will you go? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her jacket and handed me a small envelope. Don't open this unless you have to. And if you do, burn it after. I stared at it, terrified and furious. I should turn you in. You could, she said. But you won't. I stood up, trembling. You lied to me for 15 years. And you still think I'll protect you. I know you will. Because underneath all that anger, you still love your sister. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard her voice, soft and distant. Goodbye, Mel. I didn't say it back. I didn't want to believe what I had uncovered, but the weight of the evidence was too heavy to ignore. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying all our moments together, every birthday, every late-night phone call, every time I defended her. And now, I was supposed to confront her about a life she never told me about. I waited until Sunday. That was our tradition, Sunday brunch at her place. I showed up with the usual blueberry muffins, but this time, my heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the birds chirping outside her house. She opened the door with her usual bright smile, but I saw it now, the mask. It wasn't a smile of comfort. It was a performance. Hey, Zoe, she chirped, reaching for a hug. I hugged her back stiffly, then stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon toast tried to ease my nerves, but I wasn't here for brunch. Not this time. As we sat down, I placed a manila folder on the table between us. Her smile faded almost instantly. What's this? She asked, her voice dipping just slightly, like she already knew. I think you should tell me. I replied quietly. She hesitated, then reached out and opened it. Inside were the documents I had printed, court records, aliases, and a photo of her with a man labeled subject's father in a criminal investigation report. Her hands trembled as she looked through each page. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" I said, my throat dry. "You told me Mom and Dad adopted you when you were a baby. You said your real parents died in a car accident. But none of that was true, was it?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from shame or fear. "I was trying to protect you," she murmured. "From what?" I snapped, my voice cracking. "From the truth? From knowing who you really are?" She leaned back in her chair, staring at the folder like it was a bomb. "My name isn't even Melissa," she finally admitted. "I was born Alyssa Connors. My father, he was part of a major crime ring in Louisiana. Witness protection moved us when I was 9. They changed my name, gave us new identities. I met your parents through the program. They were chosen. But we bonded. They really did raise me like their own." I was speechless. My entire life, our entire sisterhood, was a government operation? "I wanted to tell you 100 times," she said, tears now spilling. "But I was afraid you'd look at me differently, that you'd stop loving me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw both the pain and the fear behind those familiar eyes. The woman I'd called my sister wasn't gone, but she was far more complicated than I had ever known. The days that followed felt like walking through a shattered version of my life. Everywhere I turned, there were pieces of the truth I didn't want to pick up, memories I had to reprocess, words she said that now meant something entirely different. I didn't cut Alyssa, off immediately. But I did need space. We texted a few times, small things surface level. She didn't push. She knew I was spinning in a whirlpool of emotions she'd triggered. I had so many questions I couldn't ask her yet. Who else knew? Were there other lies? Was I ever in danger? One night, I sat alone in my apartment, looking through old photo albums. In every one of them, Alyssa was there, Christmas mornings, summer vacations, graduation day. Her face never changed. The love looked real. But now I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I finally opened up to my parents. That conversation was its own earthquake. "You knew?" I asked them, barely able to keep the hurt from my voice. My mom looked devastated. "Yes, we knew. We were told not to say anything. We didn't adopt her the traditional way. We were part of a federal protection program. But from the moment she stepped into our home, she was our daughter. No less than you." "But you lied to me too," I said. "You all did." "It wasn't about lying," my dad said, eyes heavy. "It was about survival. There were threats. Real ones. We did what we had to do." That word, survival, echoed in my mind. I didn't forgive them right away. I couldn't. But I began to see it from a different angle. They didn't hide the truth to betray me. They hid it to keep someone safe. And not just anyone, my sister. The girl who taught me how to tie my shoes. Who stayed up with me the night I didn't get into my dream college. Who gave me her last $20 when I was broke and scared. The person I loved didn't disappear. She had simply come with a past I never knew I'd have to accept. The real question was, could I? Something in me began to soften, though I resisted it at first. I wasn't ready to let go of the betrayal, but the pain was no longer consuming me. It was evolving. I could finally hear her voice again in my head without flinching. I remembered how Alyssa, yes, I had begun to use her real name in my mind, once climbed into my bed after I had a nightmare and whispered stories until I fell asleep. That kind of love doesn't vanish under the weight of secrets. One afternoon, she texted me, "Still your sister. Always. Even if you don't want me to be." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "I want to. I just don't know how to yet." We started talking slowly. Not about the big things, just movies, music, stupid memes. It felt like we were relearning each other, gently stepping around the cracks. Then one day, she asked if I wanted to meet her for coffee. I said yes. Sitting across from her in that little cafe, I noticed how different she looked. Not in her appearance, she looked the same, but in the weight she carried. She wasn't hiding anymore. Her voice had a calm confidence I hadn't noticed before. "I hated lying to you," she said, her eyes shimmering. "But I didn't have a choice. I was running from something that wanted me dead. They killed my dad, and they were coming for me next. The government hid me, gave me a new identity, and your family saved my life." I didn't respond right away. My throat tightened. "You didn't choose me. But you became my sister anyway," I finally said. "That counts for something." She smiled, timid but hopeful. "Maybe we can start over?" "Not over," I said. "Forward." It wasn't a resolution, but it was something better. A beginning, born from truth. We met again 2 days later, this time at a park we used to go to when we were kids. She brought a small envelope, unmarked and folded several times. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it to me. "This is everything," she said. "Everything they let me keep." I hesitated before opening it. Inside were faded documents, photographs, and a few handwritten notes. One photo caught my eye, a much younger version of her, with a man I didn't recognize. He looked military. Stern, proud. There was something haunting in his eyes. "That's my real father," she said quietly. "Colonel David Matthews. He was working undercover with an intelligence group when he found out something he wasn't supposed to. He was killed in a staged car crash. I was 9. I flipped to a typed letter with a government seal on the header. Words like witness protection, relocation, national security, and targeted by foreign actors jumped out at me. They placed me with a civilian family that agreed to foster me under strict non-disclosure. "Your parents." Her voice cracked. "Your mom always wanted a second child, and I guess I looked like I belonged." "You were never adopted?" I asked, stunned. She shook her head. "No. Everything was temporary. But your mom treated me like I was hers from the moment I arrived." "So did you." It was hard to take in. My entire childhood, our sibling bond, suddenly felt like a constructed illusion. But then I looked at her again. I thought about the nights we laughed ourselves to sleep, the secrets we'd whispered, the games we'd made up. "I was supposed to disappear again after high school," she continued. "But I begged them to let me stay. I told them I finally had a real life." "And they let you?" I asked. "They did. But I had to cut off all contact with anyone who might link me to my old identity. I kept quiet, kept my head down. That's why I never dated, never traveled. I was scared of slipping up, of dragging you into it." I stared down at the envelope in my hands. This was beyond family drama. This was espionage, loss, sacrifice. But what stood out the most was what she hadn't lost. "Me." "You could have told me," I said. "I wanted to. So many times. I'm glad you finally did." In that moment, I realized something. My sister may not have been who she said she was. But she was always who she chose to be. My sister. After everything, I expected things to go back to normal, or at least settle into a new version of it. But life doesn't just snap back after a truth that heavy. The next few weeks were quiet. We didn't talk every day like before. Sometimes we went days without texting. It wasn't anger or distance, just space. Space to process, to heal, to understand what we even were to each other now. But deep down, I missed her. I missed the way we used to laugh in the kitchen while making late-night snacks. I missed calling her after a bad day, knowing she'd always pick up, even when she was half asleep. I knew the truth now, but that didn't change the memories. It didn't change the bond. One Saturday, I showed up at her apartment unannounced. She answered in sweats, hair pulled back, eyes tired. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. "Can we talk?" She nodded and let me in. We sat on the couch in silence for a while. The TV buzzed in the background, playing a rerun of some show we used to love. I finally turned to her and asked, "Are you leaving?" She looked down at her hands. "I might have to. Some old contacts reached out after that background check you ran. It created a ripple I didn't expect." Guilt stabbed me in the chest. "That's my fault." "No," she said firmly. "I should have told you. I should have trusted you earlier." I asked what leaving meant this time. Different name again? Another city? Another fake life? She shook her head. I don't want that. I'm tired of running. Then she reached into a drawer and handed me a sealed envelope. If something happens to me, give this to the lawyer on the label. It explains everything. Who I am, where I came from. It clears your family's name too. Just in case. I held it tightly. It felt heavier than paper. That night, we stayed up talking. Really talking. Not just about the past, but about the future. She told me she'd been seeing someone quietly. A guy named Marcus. A civil rights lawyer. He knew about her situation and was helping her explore a way to go public and stay protected. Maybe even testify about what she knew. It was risky, but she said she was tired of half-living. I want to be real, she said. For once in my life, I want to stand still and be seen. I told her whatever she chose, I'd be in her corner. Sister or not by blood, she was family. And family, real family, doesn't walk away. When I left that night, the sky was just beginning to lighten. A new day. A new chapter. I didn't know if she'd disappear again. I didn't know if she'd survive what was coming. But I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't who she said she was. She was more. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name in her curling script. My hands trembled as I opened it. If you're reading this, it means things didn't go as planned. I took the risk. I wanted to stop hiding. I wanted to live truthfully, even if it cost me everything. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I let fear control so much of who I became. But you gave me the courage to try. You reminded me that even someone like me deserves love and family. You once asked who I really was. The answer is, I'm still figuring that out. But what I know now is that you were the one real thing in my life. You saved me, even when you didn't know it. I couldn't stop the tears. I clutched the letter to my chest like it was the last piece of her I'd ever have. A week after that, I got another package, this time from Marcus. He had managed to get her into a federal protection program. She was alive, safe, but unreachable for the foreseeable future. He included a photo, her, standing in front of a lake, no disguise, no fake hair, no fear in her eyes. Just her, really her. And on the back, she'd written, still your sister. Always. I stood there, sunlight streaming through the window, heart split open in the best and worst way. She wasn't who I thought she was. She was braver, stronger, deeper, and more real than anyone I'd ever known. The truth didn't destroy us. It revealed us. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it away in a box labeled Real Things, and whispered to the sky, wherever you are, I see you. Sometimes, the people who hide the most are the ones who end up showing us what truth really looks like.